Not sure if you can hear me. Welcome. It's Mike Eisenhart. We're going to be trying to get started here any second. If you can hear me and you can hit the chat item or just speak back into your microphone. I don't see anybody logged on, but I do see some viewers. So bear with me.
Hello.
Hey, Cinema, welcome.
Hey, how's it going? I don't know how this thing is kicking in.
So if you look at your top panel there, you can change your video and audio link, I think. Or let me see if I might be able to do the same for you. Let's see. No, I think that hides everything if I hide you.
No, it's fine. We'll do this. It'll be kind of interesting.
All right. So I'm not sure if I have to like physically invite people or if they're just people kind of viewing. It says in the bottom there are viewers, but I don't know what that means. And I have a little icon there that says
Hang on.
you can, like a cameraman icon.
Oh, I think this is on your side. I don't see it.
How to set up live Google Hangouts. Is this done like on air? Is that how this works?
Yeah,
Is that what you did?
it's yep. I think that's what it's called, like Hangouts on Air.
Okay.
And then it's recording. So I guess what I'm going to do is, because I just had Gene Shirakabrad DM me and say, hey, are you guys doing this? And looks like Dr. Monique can hear you both. That's from Twitter. Thanks. I appreciate that. We're trying to get started here. But we want people to be on as well and join into the conversation. So I'm not exactly sure how to do that or if I have to invite folks. Let's see. I'm going to try putting that.
Sounds like something's happening.
So this might just be a conversation between you and me, which wouldn't be bad.
I'm good with that.
Let's see. So we got people who are tweeting me and saying, hey, I can hear you. If you want to just sort of listen in, that's fine. I would love to have you on. I like Real Talk coming back saying, doing this and Pat's Cold game and Cubs, Mets all online. That's not bad. Multitasking. So yeah, anybody who wants to come online, I guess maybe if you can hear and or see, I enabled the Q&A function, so hopefully people can hit that or the chat component, and we can get rolling there. But yeah, so why don't we talk a little bit about what we're trying to do here and what we're hoping to accomplish. And even though this is our first go at it, we can give it a shot and have a little bit of a conversation. And it looks like some folks will tweet questions over, and that's fine. I can keep a close eye on that as well.
Perfect. All right.
So go ahead, start us off.
All right, great. So even though I can't have you guys on right now, I'll just give you a quick introduction as to how I got interested in what we are doing. I was just trying to start a conversation around food, nutrition, and how it affects and how it interplays with what we do in the clinic. Now, all of us have a background, a bit of a story about how we got interested in nutrition, diet, food, and how it played a role in our lives. And I think that's an important thing. Once you experience it, it's easier to express it and to a patient and to kind of get them on board a bit. So I'll start with my story. So my name's Cinema, and you know why we started this. I just told you. The what part of this is I'm hoping that we get more people interested in this and more people talking about it online, and kind of getting a little bit of a movement so that we can get people to make some changes, to post their changes, to change their lifestyles and post evidence of changes of their lifestyles, pictures, videos, whatnot. Talk about changes with people in the clinic, patients, even coworkers. That's a powerful thing because it relates to the patients who come in. And so yeah, I'm hoping to get the most out of this, and I'm hoping to learn a lot from you guys. So I'm excited about that. I'm hoping to learn a lot from Mike. He's had a different approach on this. I'm admittedly not as green as Mike. I did enjoy my bacon and eggs this morning, so.
So did I.
So we'll keep a bit of an even keel, or at least keep it interesting. So, all right, that's me. Gene, looks like you're on, and I can hear you. So tell us a little bit about how you've gotten interested in this subject.
Well, I like to eat. So that's kind of where we started.
Perfect. It's a good place, man.
Well, Mike was on the podcast and talked about it. I'm always interested in learning new things in terms of different aspects of nutrition, health, wellness, different fields. And so, I did sports for a long time, and I feel like nutrition was a big part that was missing when we were training, when we were playing. I played college baseball, and we worked a lot, we trained a lot, we practiced, we worked out, but nutrition was lacking in a lot of ways. The mentality, especially in fitness, is you eat, you pack on, you put on, and a lot of it gets lost in terms of the quality. A lot of it is about quantity. So I started looking into what quantity and quality differences really were and what that meant. Do you really need to do a lot of quantity, or if you pick the right stuff that you put into your body, does it really make a big effect? And a lot of times it's not really sexy, being in the gym, working out, training, that's really sexy because you have almost immediate effects. Even though it takes time to build up, you can feel it, you can sense it almost, when you're doing it. But when you're eating, you really don't have that. You're hungry, then you eat, and then you're not. Or if you're training, you just eat for a different goal. So I think it's important to really look at a lot of aspects of nutrition, and I am nowhere near as green as Mike. But I did, Mike, have a salad for dinner today.
Nice.
Granted, it was after I ate a bowl of chili, so I was kind of full. So the salad was almost like a dessert to the chili. The chili was delicious, and it did have vegetables in it too.
It's a start. It's a start.
Also had sushi today. How does sushi play into everything? I love fish. I eat a lot of fish. I'm always curious how the whole fish thing plays into the green movement.
So yeah, I mean, in general, you have to think of it in terms of, it depends on a spectrum, right? So you have some people who are, complete and total vegan who would tell you that no, fish is bad, and they, there are many reasons why they can cite, and the most common one, of course, is mercury, and other, sort of toxins, that are carried along, small fish gets eaten by bigger fish, and so on and so forth. Me personally, I mean, my opinion is that it's a kind of a spectrum. So you start with what you can handle. And if you having a salad tonight is like a step in the right direction, that's great. And I think that if you look up, the folks from like University of Michigan or Harvard Public Health, they have their own version of the food pyramid, and they're very happy to tell you that, look, like, lean meats are on there somewhere, and they may not be the center of the plate anymore, just given the way that we sort of live our lives, but if you move them toward the outside of the plate or to a smaller quantity, they're not going to harm you. But obviously, it all depends on the stressors you face and sort of the environment you live in, and the diet should match that. So I'm going to let you guys go for a second. I'm going to try to add a couple other folks here who direct message me their Gmail accounts. And for anybody who's listening that wants to jump on, it seems like that works. So if you direct message me your, at Mike Eisenhart, if you direct message me your, Gmail account, I can then add you sort of almost manually.
Perfect. Hey, Gene, have you, in the clinic, have you actually had conversations with patients about this, about changing their food, changing their nutrition?
Oh man, in the clinic I've had such conversations that I will never repeat because I will get my license taken away. Yeah, we've covered a lot of topics. When I was in the clinic, when I was treating, we definitely talked a spectrum of things, and I treated a lot of runners, I treated a lot of triathletes, a lot of athletes in general. And
how do you advise them? What do you tell them?
I advise them based on what I know. So I tell them this is what I've done that's worked for me. Take it with a grain of salt, and this is what I know based on my limitations of the information, and I tell them that. And then when I don't know the complexity of something, the best I can do is offer the science that I know. And it's the same thing when not dealing with nutrition, when dealing with anything in physical therapy or medicine. If I don't know the end result of something, I could at least tell them the physics of something or the biomechanics of something, and tell them this is what I know. These are some of the connections we could make possibly. This is what it might mean. And you formulate your own thought process and action, more importantly, after that. And then I did the same thing with food. This is what I know. If you want to go beyond that, reach out to a nutritionist, and I tried my best. That was the hardest referral for me to find over the years, is a dietitian to refer people to.
Without a doubt.
I had a really, really tight-knit group of physicians, surgeons, PTs. I knew a few acupuncturists, yoga instructors, but a dietitian, I could just not find the dietitian that I would send people to, and it was one of the hardest things. And I actually had a dietitian as a patient. I was so excited. I was like, "What do you do?" She's like, "I'm a dietitian." I was like, "Yes, finally!" And then she's like, "Yeah, I don't really take people." I was like,
"Oh gosh,
you gotta be kidding me! What kind of dietitian are you?"
Hey, you know what? That's actually kind of where we are in the clinic at this point. We're starting to see the need for a nutritional counseling on the side, along with PT, and we're actually having a very, very difficult time finding somebody. So same thing, and I also, I kind of take the same approach you do. It's kind of an N=1, like here's what worked with me, and here's my thought process, and that way I basically tell them that, hey, this is pretty much personalized to me, but this is the way I thought about it, and maybe if you're interested in it, you could think about it this way and try to find something that fits you. So I just give very general recommendations, and more often than not, it's rather than recommending someone to try something, it's more often a subtraction than an addition.
Right, and it's, like you said, sometimes it's just eliminating a little bit of doubt or confusion that they had about something that they don't really know about. that you do, even though it might not be fully in depth. And there's plenty of other things that I had really strong thoughts about and stances that I wasn't shy about. So to me, it's, you know, if there's something that I'm either not completely 100% in for or that I don't know, I'm not really going to put myself out there, because if it comes out that that's something that I really didn't know about or was just kind of, you know, blowing smoke out of my ass, then I think it takes away from the stuff that you really do know and things that you have a lot of
That's a good
of
point.
awareness about. So I always shy away from things like that. Just, you know, be honest with people. I'm okay telling somebody, listen, that's not something that I really know a ton about, but this is what I found out so far, and this is what's worked for me. Do what you want with that.
Hey, Gene, let me jump in for a sec. Just a technical question. How did you actually get on? I sent you the invite. Did you click on an icon or something?
I clicked on. No, I got an invite because I have Google Hangouts on my phone, so I just got a notification that I was invited and just clicked on it.
Okay, because we got some folks who are trying, but
had to call
they-
my
can
contacts
hear.
at Google and you know, pull a few strings and
Larry,
offer.
help me out. Help me out, Larry.
I had
sorry.
to bribe them with a box of Omaha steaks. Is that
Nice.
weird?
Yeah.
Is that weird? Yeah.
Hey, so Gene, did you ever do any to track your changes? Did you ever do any like blood work, or how did you track your changes? Or was it just like a sense of like I feel better, or I can run better, or what is it?
No, the changes, I didn't really care about changes that were going on. I really didn't. I really don't care what the blood levels are. It was, when I was playing, it was performance. You know, how well did I play? How
Perfect. Just a tracker.
How much better could I do? And then it was just other more standard changes. You know, checking, keeping track of muscle mass, keeping track of weight, keeping track of BMI, things like that, and seeing how it goes. And you know, at that time, it was very rudimentary. You know, you could do the caliper stuff, which I think was the best in terms of figuring out body density stuff, because I was an exercise science major, so we did all that stuff anyway. It was awesome, actually. I was an exercise science major with a bio minor and a psychology minor, so I think the perfect mixture of everything. And so we played with ourselves in the lab all the time, and was kind of lucky because our lab was getting more money into it at that point. It was a small liberal arts school, so we kind of got to play with all the fun toys.
So you mentioned performance. What changes did you notice in performance?
It's hard to say because I changed a lot of things. I didn't control one variable at a time. I was changing the way I worked out. I was changing the way I was eating. So the performance got better. A lot of it got better. I was tweaking a lot of things because I wasn't thinking like a scientist at the time. I was thinking like a baseball player that needed to improve. So it was do everything that you can at the time. So I started swinging with a heavier bat during training, started eating different lean meats more often, not necessarily bigger meals, and a lot more heavier lifting than I did before.
Cool. So it was a combination of different things that you noticed put together made a difference for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was that transition in my mind of being more sports specific, but while being sports specific, I was pushing myself to a whole new level versus just kind of going through a regime. Because for some reason in my mind, I had this mentality of when I was playing football of when you get past the 2-a-days in the summertime when you're like busting your ass, when you get into the season, the mentality was always just maintain, just ease off and maintain, do enough. And I had that mentality, and I got rid of it. I mean, it was push yourself and push yourself and push yourself, and then just incorporate some rest days. And same thing. I think the recovery got a lot better once I started eating a little bit better. I mean, I eliminated potato chips. It was crazy. I mean, all that junk food, all that shit, I stopped eating, and recovery was definitely, I think, the biggest thing that I saw improvement in.
I want to come back to the shit that you dropped, but before we get there, before we do a deep dive there,
how much time do you have? It was a dark, stormy night. There was a cleanse involved.
Oh God, dude, no, we're cutting that part out for future episodes. Oh, hey, so Andrew, is that you on? Can you hear me?
Yes. How you doing?
Hey, man. Cool. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what interested you into nutrition and what kind of brought you into this kind of a field that's merging into PT a little bit. So go ahead.
Well, I'm Andrew Rothschild. I've been a PT for about 9.5 years. Initially I played college and soccer for a couple of years before stopping and then getting into more of like a weight training type program and pursuit. And more recently, I guess I've developed a bigger interest in nutrition over the past several years, but especially in terms of how it relates now to patients and with pain, as well as from injury recovery and tissue healing perspective.
So have you made any changes that you've noticed within yourself as a prior athlete, maybe an injury and or just in general well-being? Have you noticed any changes?
Yeah, definitely general well-being. I had a spinal fusion L4-5 about 15 years ago when I was 23, and that's what got me into physical therapy. And then I've always been, generally active and healthy. So even making a cleaner dietary change wasn't that much of a challenge for me because it always was pretty good. But I've noticed a big difference in terms of energy levels and, both at work and with family and with training, and then just with general mood and attitude and those kinds of things.
Perfect. Sounds exciting, man. So it sounds very similar to what Mike and I have been talking about. So I think you'll really enjoy the hangouts going forward. Looks like Karen's on. Karen, you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Oh, good.
Everybody knows who you are, so you don't need to do a self-introduction. So Karen, tell us a little bit about how you've kind of toyed with or worked with the nutritional aspect of, your health and maybe even with some of your clients, your patients.
So I feel like I've always eaten well ever since I was a kid, just instilled in me from my parents, and I was always athletic. I did gymnastics for 10 years and softball for, 25 years, and ran track and things like that in high school. And so we sort of a family that always ate well. I never, we weren't allowed the sugary cereals or, cookies and cakes and things like that. And so that's carried over into adulthood, I guess. But more recently, I've been probably eating more vegetarian, less red, really no red meat whatsoever, mainly chicken, fish, and vegetables. And I found that just for myself, my energy has been way, way up as a result of that. And then also when I went back to school last year to get my DPT, we had a course on wound care, and a big part of the wound care course was nutrition. And so we worked with a nutritionist, and I heard before you guys, it was hard to find a nutritionist.
Yes.
In your practice. So I have one that works everywhere because she does consults via Skype and email and everything, and she's a registered dietitian. She's not a nutritionist. She's a registered dietitian. So I worked with her and then with another registered dietitian at NYU to help me with my that DPT course on wound care, because a huge part of wound care is what you eat. And so that's carried over into my patients, post-op patients and things like that. I now have some good data for them in order to have them up their protein intake in order to help their healing process. So for me, that's how I've been incorporating it clinically. And, just the basics. Like if it comes in a box or a bag, you probably shouldn't be eating it.
Right.
Because it's overly processed. So, you stick to the outside of the outer rims of the supermarket and keep what comes in a bag and a box at a minimum.
Perfect.
Which is what I try to do. It's not perfect, but I try.
Looks like we have Monique on. Oh, perfect. All right, so everybody knows Monique too, so she doesn't need an introduction. So Monique, talk to us a little bit about your nutritional background and if you're using it with patients in conjunction with a nutritionist, dietitian, or how you're applying it into the clinical realm. Go ahead.
Okay, it's me right now, right?
That's you.
Okay. Well, first I tried it on myself. I've always been involved in sports, but after college, I got lazy with the hustle and bustle of physical therapy, so I started eating a lot of junk food. Basically, became Americanized. So I gained in excess over 70 pounds, and was starting to get shoulder breath and developing allergies. So I decided to get serious and change my diet and work out. So I started off doing something with my church, which we wanted to do a Daniel fast, which was just fruits and vegetables, no processed foods, no sugars, no dairy or cheese. So I did that for 21 days. And it drastically changed in losing weight, increasing my energy. My patients all started noticing the difference, and some of them started doing it as well. Along with my business partner, who is very big on the eat for your blood type
Yeah, I kind
issue.
of have heard that. Yeah. Yeah.
And she's strictly organic with her eating, so she's very particular about the stuff that she eats, and she pretty much only eats stuff that she cooks or grows. So we started to incorporate it with our clients who are predominantly home health, who have a lot of comorbidities with diabetes, high blood pressure, and stuff like that. Basically advising them on making better choices so they won't have to be rehospitalized because of poor eating habits and poor diets, which can contribute to like kidney problems and other issues as well.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that everybody mentioned was the change in energy levels. And I actually find that really interesting because that's kind of what drove me to investigate this for myself nutritionally. I noticed that, and I don't know why it took me so many years to notice this, but the crash between 2 to 4 p.m. in the afternoons. It got to me once, and I couldn't figure out why it was happening. And that was also the time when most people reach for a cup of coffee. It's mid-afternoon. And so that's when I started playing with my food and trying to figure out if there's any way I could make my energy not dip in the mid-afternoon. And the biggest thing that changed was my my breakfast. And again, this is specifically just for me because I've played around with it and found it, but a zero carb, zero sugar breakfast, higher in fat, and the dip pretty much goes away. And again, this is specific for me, so I'm not saying it'll be for everybody listening. But the energy level was what showed me that the food actually made a huge difference with even something that people thought was normal, which is a crash in the afternoon, which is when you go get your coffee.
Are you trying to say I should have my Fruit Loops mixed in with a cup of sugar?
Gene, you've got enough energy to last. You can have as many bowls of Fruit Loops as you'd like.
That's true. That's true. Count Chocula. Fruit Loops to the side of Count Chocula. Delicious.
So anyway, that's interesting hearing you guys say bring up like the same thing, the same energy thing. Karen, quick question. So you mentioned wound care.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of advice would you give? Let's say me, if I, had this wound and I was seeing you.
I usually tell my patients, and I was just trying to look up before exactly how much you have to up your protein intake. I have it's somewhere on my computer. I just don't know where it is. but I usually just tell patients afterwards that, especially after they've had a surgical procedure, that they just to think about upping their protein intake, and that can be whatever protein they would normally. I'm not stressing red meat or anything like that, but just whatever protein that you would normally take in to up it a little bit, because you have a lot of your energy that is converted into healing that wound that may normally go towards your other things throughout the day. So you want to kind of up your protein intake so that you can heal that wound as well as have the energy that you need to live throughout the day. And I was trying to look up before. I have the values somewhere in my coursework on my computer. I just don't know where it is.
That's okay, Karen. Maybe I'll put together a show notes for the Hangout. So maybe if you email it to me, I'll include it in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah, I will try and find it. It is. Oh wait, is this? It is somewhere. I just don't know where it is.
No worries. No worries. Cool. Well, I'm glad you guys jumped on. I don't think there has been a Hangout or a conversation on nutrition and PT. So just want to get feedback from you guys. Going forward, what kind of things are you kind of hoping to get out of these conversations, which hopefully will include more people in the future? So, Andrew, why don't you go first?
Well, I really like the conversation because, especially with, this topic, it's one that, we're talking about, but I think in general, PTs don't deal a lot with. And I think as direct access improves and our role as primary care providers hopefully increases, we may have a stronger or larger role to play in this area, because it does impact tissue healing, as in wound care, or it does impact tissue healing post-surgical, just as it does with an athlete who's recovering from an injury or an athlete who's recovering from a strenuous workout. It's just scaled back a little bit when we're dealing with our patients. But I wrote a blog post about this too, that with chronic pain, especially when we start talking about the gut and the microbiome and how its influence may be on patients in chronic pain, it may play a very big role in this area, and that's going to be another thing that we can deal with that may help in a big way with our various educational interventions.
What is the concrete evidence for the microbiome in chronic pain?
Well, I don't know that there's any concrete evidence yet. I think there's just some suggestive information in terms of things that improve serotonin production, or things that improve or inhibit the production of GABA or glutamate from different foods and different reactions. When the fact that with our enteric nervous system, the immune response and how that affects pain, and how it affects systemic inflammation and how that might affect pain.
Yeah, that's basically where the strongest link right now is that I found, and we've been looking at this for a while, on the microbiome, and basically the sort of low-level systemic inflammation, that seems to be the area that has the greatest support, and that certain foods trigger this and certain foods seem to suppress it, and they see that there's actually a change relatively quickly. Some studies have come back and said even as little as 2 days. One of the things that they've really looked at is this may be sort of the unknown link of fiber, right? Like everyone kind of thought for a long, long time that you can't really do much with fiber. It just kind of mechanically cleans you, sort of scrapes you. But now what they're finding is that some of the bacteria in the gut can actually feed on this, and that it has a immunosuppressant type, or anti-inflammatory is a better way to say it, anti-inflammatory effect. And that starts to change in as little as 2 days, and people start to see lower risk of all sorts of things. No, I don't think anyone has linked it to pain primarily, and so I did read Andrew's blog, and I think it's making some links that people are starting to look at. But it's kind of like the idea of this is, if you are in a chronic state of low level or low grade inflammation, are you more susceptible to everything? Are you going to trigger earlier?
Yeah, Mike. So guys, I attended this conference yesterday. It was the North American Spine annual meeting, and one of the things that was brought up it was just mentioned by quite a few of the speakers, was the word cytokines, and cytokines related to inflammation. And it was very interesting to hear that, because it's not something that I hear in the PT world mentioned very much. It's a word that kind of exists in I don't know, pain management and nutrition, more so than in PT. So I went up and talked to one of the researchers, and she basically said that it's something that a lot more people in the rehab and physical therapy world are looking at as a way to better understand pain and better understand the brain's response to movement or even smudging or mapping in the brain. And so I think there's going to be a lot more coming out about this in the next couple of years.
So one of the things that we've looked at, and you know, so we've been dealing with the sort of how nutrition plays into, I don't like to use the word function because it's not really function in the sense that as PTs we often talk about it, but more along the lines of performance like Gene was describing, not just athletic performance, but that whole idea of sort of living and being at your best, right? So something beyond function. And so we started looking at nutrition as a component, and one of the links that we've really seen you know, is that there is some evidence for this idea of, well, if you can get low-level pain, you know, from an occluded artery, you know, in your heart, why would you expect to not have an occluded artery, you know, somewhere further down the line? And there's a real neat study that showed, you know, some of the, you know, sort of atherosclerotic changes in, you know, in the sacral arteries. And it sort of makes you think along those lines of, we know that, you know, blood flow restriction isn't the source of chronic pain necessarily, but does it trigger pain, or does it somehow have a role in it? And so that's kind of one of those questions where they're looking at it and saying, well, is it a canary in the coal mine? And I've often thought, well, you know, I mean, maybe that's part of the reason why when people go on kind of general walking programs, many times they just feel better, right? Is there some role to be said in kind of oxygenation of tissue? And in which case, you know, do they feel better? And if they're in a resting state of inflammation, would they feel worse just in general? And there are some, you know, some researchers who have looked into this and seen some intriguing connections.
We see this in stenosis versus vascular claudication in terms of pain that is due to a vascular issue potentially.
Absolutely, it's a great example. And so that's where it seems that most of the you know, the direction that we're seeing folks go is into this kind of low-grade inflammation being kind of a link to many forms of disease. And if you can limit that, or at least slow the progression of it, are you also slowing the progression of disease? And, you know, and although I know that sometimes I get grilled for using the word prevention, but that's, you know, that's kind of the idea as well. If you're slowing the progression, are you preventing it from getting to a disease state? So one of the most interesting things I think that's out there, and this is one of those kind of like provocative Harvard School of Public Health studies. They came out and they showed that, you know, there was a 50% increase in the likelihood of developing diabetes if you have even one serving of bacon a day, right? And this was like a prospective study on thousands of women, and you can find it. And what they ultimately came back from was they said, we think that the processed, it wasn't necessarily the meat per se, but to Karen's point, you know, sort of the processing of it was an inflammatory insult on the body. And if you had a daily dose of inflammation, they showed this kind of linkage. Now, of course, you can't make a causative, you know, you can't say, oh, it was the bacon. And even though they seem to have a thing against bacon, if you ever look at the Harvard food pyramid, you know, and the way I always look at it is that Harvard has so much money that they don't need to like pay attention to special interests, so they don't get lobbied a lot, and so not like kind of you know, unlike the USDA, and so because of that, they sort of tell you like, well, this is what we think the science says. And it flat out says, avoid bacon and processed meat, you know, avoid sugary drinks. It was like the first group to actually come out and say, avoid these things, as opposed to like, you know, in moderation. But that was one of the very, you know, kind of early studies that showed this link between inflammation and diabetes, which we previously thought was only a sugar, issue. Like, well, if you have sugar issues, you're going to have diabetes. But that's not what they found. It was the link with inflammation.
Yeah, that was another key word that was brought up over and over again at the spine conference. Inflammation and cytokines were pretty much mentioned in tandem the entire time. So I think there's going to be a lot more coming out on that, and I think it's good for us as PTs to start to integrate some of this with our patients in the clinic through either with a dietitian or at least with a nutritionist, and at least make our patients aware that, hey, this is an option, and we can, kind of funnel them into a direction where they can get some good advice, and which will kind of cycle back and help us as PTs gain more out of them as patients.
And it's making it relevant to the person, right? It's everyone takes a different approach to nutrition. The athlete looks at it as fuel. Somebody that has a family history of issues, it's more of a health issue. So it's again not just having a spiel on nutrition. It's having a relevant presentation based on the person. So it's knowing different aspects of what you're bringing to the table to the person in front of you.
That's very true. So quick question for you guys. How do you start the conversation in the clinic with your patient about nutrition? Do you wait for them to bring it up, or is it something that you ask them? So maybe we'll start, Andrew.
Yeah, I think that's hard because I think it depends on the patient and your relationship with that patient, because I think for some patients you can turn them off because they have the perception that you may be overstepping their bounds, or they're not there to see you for that purpose. And I think with others, they actually welcome it, and if you've already have a good relationship with them and have that nice trust already formed, they welcome that, and they have that, they trust you for the information.
Yeah, so go ahead. So Monique, do you wait for them to bring it up, like ask you about food, or is there something you do to kind of like start that conversation? Is there something you do to start that conversation with the patient, or do you kind of wait for the patient to say something? Perfect. So that's like patient initiated. Cool. Gene, what about you?
Yeah, I get the whole point that Andrew was making, that you kind of want to watch what you're saying, but I guess it's a double-edged sword, because we by the time the person was coming to the clinic to see me or be treated at our clinic, I think one of the best things about being in the profession is trying to break down that barrier as quickly as possible and build a relationship. And so that's something that I always look forward to the most, and that's something that I worked on more than a lot of things, and that incorporated a lot of things. So we talked about everything from their daily routine, stuff they do for fun, things that they don't usually think about sharing with a clinician. And so, yeah, we talked about kind of eating habits, their routines, if they're athletes, what they go through, and it's all in a form of questions for their improvement versus me telling them what they should do. The difference between advice and just preaching. So that it was usually initiated by me. For people that there's always avenues for people that are not athletes or not as easily sharing nutrition. People that go through fads of different programs, P90X, all those things. As long as you kind of know what those things entail, which most people in the PT profession should, because a lot of people do them and get injured from them. So you should have some kind of knowledge of those programs, and a lot of them have a quote unquote nutritional aspect to it. So a lot of times I would look up what that entailed, and people would tell me, oh yeah, I did P90X and hurt my hamstring, or I did P90X and was doing some kind of handstand back twist thing and landed on my neck. I was like, oh great, that sounds like fun, but are you also doing their food program thing? They're like, oh yeah, well yeah, and then it just opens up the doorway to what they eat. And if a high school softball player came in eating a bag of chips, and I was asking her, oh, is this your snack or was this your lunch? She's like, yeah, I haven't really had anything to eat until this bag of chips. Then we kind of talk about the fuel and then all that other stuff for her body, and same thing for her parents. So there's a lot of cues you can take, a lot of entryways, but I typically didn't shy away from starting conversations with people, and if they were offended or they didn't like it, I did what I thought I had to do, and if they didn't come back, I'm okay with that.
Right on. So yeah, so as we kind of get near the end of tonight, so our hope tonight was really just to kind of see, I hate to say if there was an appetite for this, like I'll be here all week. Just the idea of our PTs looking at this seriously, and one of the main reasons why is because there is a new position statement that basically says, look, we have a role in this. The APTA came out last year through the House of Delegates and made quite a few actually that were related to kind of lifestyle approach and prevention and wellness and kind of where we fit in. But there was one that was very much specific to nutrition, and I had posted that earlier today. But so in talking between myself and Cinema, we had just kind of said, well, look, we really think there's a need for this to start this conversation, because if we're going to do it, we really should be approaching it in an evidence-based way, like we would everything else. And there's a risk that because we don't have this necessarily in our entry-level education deeply. I mean, I'm sure there's some maybe in today's DPT, as there wasn't really any in mine. But how do we start this conversation? And so I guess I would just want to kind of take the last few minutes and talk that through some. Where do we go from here as a profession? How do we live up to that position of, look, we have a role in this? Is it simply not looking the other way? When someone walks in and they are carrying some extra weight and they're there for their knee, is it just simply the responsibility to say, look, your knees would likely feel better if you were 50 pounds lighter? Or is it something along the lines of, look, this is integral to our ability to reach your goals, and if we don't address it as one of your kind of treatment aspects, then we're missing the boat? Or is it somewhere in between the two? So where does everybody shake out on that? Mm-hmm. Nice. Right, it's definitely both sides of the balance for sure. I said it definitely seems to be, you know, a more balanced approach, right? Instead of just talking about activity, you know, we have to look at both sides of it. Sure.
Yeah,
Fantastic. Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
I was going to say, I agree with Monique there, and I've had people from outside of physical therapy often ask, well, why aren't, like, they've had good experiences with physical therapists in one of the mastermind group I'm in, and he was like, I don't understand why physical therapists aren't on the forefront of weight loss for people who are significantly overweight, because we're movement experts. We can, like Monique said, we can give people exercises that are appropriate for them at whatever stage they're at, and if they have pain, that's kind of a great entry point for us. So I've gotten that question quite a bit, actually, and I think it's maybe a place that we're perhaps not focusing a lot of our attention. And then as far as, I mean, I go to patients' homes, so I don't really have to break down any barriers in order to have them feel comfortable with me, because I'm sitting on the ground with their dog all over me. So I'm already good, like, I'm good. Like, I'm in with them. So if I have a patient that I feel maybe needs a little advice on nutrition, if it's something that I can deal with, then I can certainly give basic nutritional advice. And if it's someone with maybe comorbidities or medical issues that they need more help, then I refer them to my friend who's a registered dietitian. Because I think as a PT, it's also important to know where your limitations are. And so when I have people with some comorbidities, I just recommend them to Hillary, then Hillary and I talk, and then I can follow through with her recommendations as time goes on. So they may only meet with her once or twice, and then it falls on to me to kind of keep them in check. And that worked, so far that's worked really, really well with several of my patients, that kind of collaboration.
Yeah, and I think that that's really in line with where the discussion was, and where most of the position kind of speaks to, is that, you know, we have a role in this. It's really in screening and probably education at some level, but that clearly as a professional we need to know when we've reached our limit, and when we're, you know, entering kind of a realm that's outside our scope, and refer out. And whether that be the MD or the, you know, RD or somebody who feels, you know, that we feel qualified. But I think that's exactly what the intention was that, you know, we can't just sort of pretend that it's not an issue and that it's not affecting our outcomes. And we also probably don't need to solve every detailed question in the case of like comorbidities. But for someone who otherwise might be generally healthy, and, you know, and just has generalized aches and pains, and, well, you know, your body would probably move better if it wasn't for that extra weight, or if you were to eat better and maybe lower that, you know, low-level inflammation, that we could be playing a role there.
And you know what else is a nice way, if you're not sure if the patient's going to take your advice unsolicited, versus them asking you, hey, do you have any advice on nutrition or weight loss or what have you, or nutrition in particular, I might bring up something that I've just tried, and whether it be like a good recipe or a move to, you know, more of a plant-based diet or what have you, and I'll sort of bring that up in the context of myself, and then that's a good way to open the door, because then I find people always have questions after that. So
that's a good point.
That's a nice way to kind of break into that conversation, is to start it out talking about yourself, and then maybe they may have a follow-up question for you, versus you being like invasive into their eating habits. So
yeah, it's a fair segue, sure.
Excellent. Well, you guys, I've had a great time. It's we're almost wrapping up on an hour here. So let's keep these conversations going, and we're thinking of doing it once a month. And we're also trying to kind of promote posting some good food on Twitter. So include the hashtag PT Kitchen with your phenomenally delicious home cooking.
Does cooking count if you just assemble? Count as cooking? Like if I assemble a really nice looking salad from my crop share association?
Absolutely. As long as it looks iPhone ready, it's good to go.
Okay. As long as it doesn't involve an oven, I'm good. I use my oven for storage.
All right, Mike, any last words? I guess Mike did say his last words. All right, cool.
No, I'm here. I'm here. Sorry, I
you're
lost
here.
you guys for a second there.
Oh, okay.
Punching out. No, so yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm at too. I mean, this was really just a start, and really hopefully start of something that we can do. You know, I like the monthly idea. I like it a lot. I think that if we can move towards something that allows us to kind of have some dialogue and then invite some other folks. And you know, I mean, it's an area that's near and dear to my heart. We've been doing it in practice for a long time now, and I think that it's something that we all need to be doing. So anything that I can do to facilitate that, I'm on board with. But I thank you all for kind of jumping on and trying this with us, and hopefully as we go, we'll work out some kinks and get more people involved.
Excellent. Thank you, guys, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Good
Bye.
night.
You too.